Channel Y. Channel Y. A South Asian Canadian channel.
And you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group. Y Media. Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का #1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9
Television. You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group. Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Brief. I am Ramona Singh, going live at 5 p.m. every weekday, bringing you the news and the headlines in local, national, and international news, as well as business news. And tonight our coverage starts in the invasion of Ukraine, as we've seen it happen since February 24th, and today marks day 27. As the UN is saying that there's about 6.5 million Ukrainians displaced inside of Ukraine and more than 3 million who have left and fled the country to neighboring countries. And Ukrainian forces are now fighting to take back territory, according to U.S. officials. Ukraine's forces said that a counter-attack north and west of Kyiv appeared to have made some headway to be able to take back some of the cities around the capital that have been under siege by the Russian forces. The war is continuously going on in Mariupol, where satellite images are showing destruction of fires and just buildings destroyed as endless fighting is happening on the streets. And President Zelensky says that he's going to work very hard to make sure that there are 9 humanitarian corridors set up at any cost. He won't quit to make sure that Ukrainian people get the aid they need to be able to leave the areas that are under full attack. And a veteran aide, this is the first time of President Vladimir Putin, has resigned over the Ukraine war. He has left Russia with no intention to return, and this is the first senior official to break with the Kremlin since the launch of the invasion about a month ago. And we have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and other NATO leaders who are set to gather tomorrow in Brussels as he's made his trip to Europe to discuss what's happening in Ukraine. And US President Joe Biden is also expected to announce fresh sanctions on members of the Russia's Duma while in Europe this week as well. And NATO has said that they will not put troops on the ground in Ukraine, but will continue to help arm Zelensky's government to be able to fight back to the Russian forces. And NATO will deploy 4 more battle groups in Eastern Europe as a part of a wide-ranging reinforcement of the region. The additional troops will be sent to Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. And Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, he has said that the events that are unfolding now, such as the war in Ukraine, he calls it an attempt by the West, meaning Western countries, to establish a new world order. This was a speech that he gave saying that what's happening in the world at the moment is not only and not so much about Ukraine, this is an attempt to create a new world order. He added in his speech that that in a narrow circle, he writes rules referring to the West and passes out the ultimate truth and requires everyone to comply with these rules. The foreign minister was talking about Ukraine being used as a tool to be able to control Russia. He says that in terms of Russian direction of NATO policy, Ukraine was chosen as an instrument for suppressing Russian independence. And for this, Ukraine is to be effective instrument of deterrence. It had to become anti-Russia, as our president recently formulated. And in this sense, a neo-Nazism was planted and encouraged there. This is more that's coming out from Russia and President Putin, as they say this is the reasoning behind them going to war with Ukraine. And as we've seen that they've been targeting civilian locations of schools, community centers, apartment buildings, as everything's being destroyed. He continues to say there's no doubt that one of the rules that the West wants to implement is to contain any competitors, talking about that the US does not want to see any other countries become a world power. And he continues to say, now here's Russia. China has been declared next, and all this will happen in parallel. So he is warning the people that were listening to his speech that Russia was a target of the United States by using Ukraine to do so. And this was some of the reasons they're justifying their war in Ukraine. And as a Ukrainian president has been begging the NATO leaders to have a no-fly zone over Ukraine, he has now said that he understands that that's not going to happen, but he does need more tools to be able to fend off the invaders that are coming into his country. And the Russian energy sector has been going through a lot of sanctions. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is saying that an instant embargo on Russian energy would be devastating for Europe and specifically for Germany, saying that suggesting anything that may happen like that would continue to make a recession come about for Europe. He said that the process of independence from Russian energy sources are in play right now, as Germany is talking to other countries, but that is a long process and it cannot just go from one day to the next without causing a great recession. He warned that the entire industries would be on the brink of collapse and that existing anti-Russian sanctions are already hitting German citizens very hard. Putin's offensive is stuck despite all destruction that is bringing day by day, said the Chancellor. He talks about how Putin thought he was going to have a quick victory over Ukraine, and now going into day 27 and almost a month of the invasion, that Putin is stuck and he may resort to worse measures such as nuclear or chemical warfare. And Scholz is saying that the only way forward is to have a diplomatic ceasefire with Ukraine and Russia, and saying that Russia needs to take a look at their future as sanctions will continue. But he does warn that the penalties and the tightening of sanctions should not hurt European states harder than the Russian leadership. And the UAE and Germany are also discussing ways to strengthen their cooperation when it comes to trade and energy. And as the foreign ministers have met together, they looked at ways to strengthen the bilateral relations and cooperations in those sectors. UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, as well as the German Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, discussed issues of common interest and specifically the war that's happening in Ukraine with Russia and the sanctions against Russian energy and how to resolve that conflict. The German minister's 3-day trip to the Middle East was aimed at finding alternative sources of energy to help Germany reduce its reliance on Russian oil and gas supplies. And President Putin has come back with all the sanctions against the Russian gas and says that he now wants rubles for Russian gas from unfriendly countries. He has a list of countries he's put on the unfriendly countries list. And now he says that the Russian plan is to abandon all compromised currency in payment settlements. So he added that illegitimate decision by a number of Western countries, meaning Canada, United States, and much more, countries to freeze Russian assets destroyed all confidence in the Russian currency. And Putin gave the central bank and the government a week to determine the procedure for operations for buying rubles on the domestic market for importers of Russian gas. He added that the Russians will continue to supply gas in accordance with the volumes and pricing principles of the contracts. The only thing changing in those contracts are the currency the payment will be received in. And the Russian deputy prime minister also predicts collapse in oil, gas markets without Russian hydrocarbons. In his speech at the government hour, he stressed that as a result of a number of steps, the rise in energy prices could become even more unpredictable. He said Russia is the largest supplier of energy resources to the world markets, and the Russian share of energy exports is about 20% of the world level of trade, which is very significant. And he continued saying, under pressure from the United States, Europe has refused to commission the already built Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to the detriment of European consumers. And that happened as the invasion happened on February 24th of Ukraine. He noted that the gas prices at some point reached $4,000 per $4,000 per 1,000 cubic meters, and this is not really the limit, he says. So it might climb from there. And the White House, in response, and as they've had discussions with the rising gas prices, now they're considering a gas card to ease the pain at gas pumps, as certain cities in the United States, such as the United States Los Angeles, has now exceeded $6 per gallon for gas for the first time. And in a meeting with business leaders and in the White House and President Biden before his departure of trip earlier this week, JP Morgan Chase CEO urged the President Joe Biden in an off-the-record meeting, saying that they need to develop a Marshall Plan to strengthen the energy security of the United States and Europe. And one way in doing that is to ramp up the U.S. natural gas production. The comments came after the meetings between the business leaders and the White House officials. And what he meant by the Marshall Plan, he was referring to what was named after U.S. Secretary of State George Marshall, who in 1947 called for a comprehensive program to rebuild Europe's infrastructure in the aftermath of World War II, and into doing so to be able to influence Western democracy after communism. And of course, as you know, in the past few years, in the reduction of carbon, environmentalists in the United States and the Western countries, and as well as the American lawmakers who are progressive, would oppose the efforts by the federal government to ramp up production of fossil fuels. And given the worsening of the climate crisis, the Democrats in Congress have now recently urged the White House to consider banning or limiting the export of both oil and natural gas due to high energy prices. The debate continues. We'll see where the House votes on those matters. And in Switzerland, who had for a very long time not been involved in any of the conflict internationally, they did get involved in this in Russia's sanctions. And now there's a petition for Switzerland to expel Putin's lover, who's known to be his mistress. This petition has now been circulated online and has hit 63,000 signatures. So the Olympic gymnast, Alina Kabeva, she's 38 years old and is believed to be Putin's mistress. And for weeks now, it's been said that she has been sent to a private chalet in Switzerland as the war continues. And now people are saying that Switzerland should step up and take action, as she's widely believed to be Putin's mistress and mother of 4 children from Putin, who he has never actually officially recognized as his children. But the petition launched by citizens in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine about 2 weeks ago have called for Swiss authorities to kick her out of Switzerland and deport her back to Russia. The appeal is describing her as the favorite wife of, in their terms, delusional dictator and war criminal Putin. And despite current war, Switzerland continues to host an accomplice of the Putin's regime. And by that they mean, as she is also a chairman of the board of directors of the National Media Group, which is a major Kremlin TV and newspaper company, with her salary at almost $10 million a year. And in national news, And there was a poll done, and 60% of Canadians stress about feeding their families amid the inflation, which has been the highest in an Ipsos poll. The food bank usage has risen 53% between January 2014 and March 2020, researchers are saying, as people worry about the rising gas prices and food prices at the grocery store and everything really going up, and how expensive housing has become. These are some of the things that they're looking at, lawmakers in Canada, to see what can be done to make sure that inflation's under control and gas prices are also under control, and for standard of living to be better and for things to be a lot more affordable. And the National Physicians' Health Survey has also suggested that half of Canadian physicians considered reducing their clinical hours as they have now felt burnt out, nearly as their time has doubled at work during the pandemic, as we saw that happen for 2 years as Canada's cases and rates kept going up. Now that this is a survey as a feedback from the physicians of the Canadian Medical Association. And in Y Media Political Sensex, there was an interview done, an exclusive interview with Patrick Brown, the mayor of Brampton, who has put his name in for the federal Conservative leadership. Just a little over a week ago, he was in the Y Media studios doing an interview with group editor Yadoo Jaswal, where Patrick Brown talked about what his goals are when he becomes leader, if he's able to win it. And he continued to attack Pierre Poilievre for backing barbaric cultural practices, and a policy Pierre Poilievre defended these practices and the niqab ban during citizen ceremonies. And he talked about his campaign manager, Jenny Burns, who was at the time the campaign chair of the Conservative Party for the Stephen Harper election in 2015. That saw them lose to Justin Trudeau's government since 2015. And he talked about the defamation lawsuit, where his name has been cleared by CTV News, who expressed regrets over the 2018 story that ended his leadership of the PC party, where he had to quickly step down before the 2018 provincial general election. The exclusive interview is only on Channel Y, and we will be playing it as it played yesterday. And more to come on that. And today, there was another leadership candidate, Leslyn Lewis, who showed a newsletter from Patrick Brown when he was an MP in 2012 in the riding of Barrie, where he had announced about the niqab ban, saying that this is to be removed during citizenship ceremonies by then Jason Kenney, who was immigration minister. Patrick Brown has hit back, saying that that newsletter was not to show support of the ban, but as an informational one for his constituents. And that continues between the leadership contestants, as we're only less than 11 weeks away from the general election for the provincial election on June 2nd. Yet what's heating up the news waves and the headlines is the Conservative leadership race, since Patrick Brown has stepped in with Pierre Poilievre, Leslyn Lewis, Jean Charest, and many other candidates who have been added on. But those four seem to be the front runner and who seem to be taking most of the headlines. And speaking of politics, Jerry Diaz, who has been the president of Unifor for a long time, which is the biggest union, he's been involved in taking sides on elections and being very active when it comes to campaigning. And now he's back in the news, and this time it's that he has accepted money from COVID-19 rapid test supplier. These are allegations by Unifor. The Unifor says that the former national president, Jerry Diaz, has accepted $50,000 from a supplier of COVID-19 rapid test kits that he promoted to employers of Unifor members, several of whom have purchased those test kits. After an internal investigation, Unifor National Secretary Treasurer said that he stands charged with violating the Code of Ethics and the democratic practices of the Unifor Constitution. The Union Executive Board will now hold a hearing into the matter and decide the fate of Jerry Diaz. Now, he has said in his own defense in a letter to the members saying that he's entering a residential rehabilitation facility and stepping away from all his advisory positions due to his use of painkillers, sleeping pills, and alcohol to deal with sciatic nerve issue. He says these factors have impaired his judgment in recent months and is seeking treatment at the advice of his doctor. So he's not denying it, but we'll see what the internal investigation comes out with on that matter. And in business news, yesterday we covered Grubhub and their practices when it came to online as a vendor to be able to deliver food where a company in the United States out of Florida is suing Google for pushing order signs on Google when people do restaurant searches, and Grubhub taking those orders. And now DC, the District of Columbia, is suing Grubhub for allegedly employing deceptive practices. The Attorney General of Washington, DC announced earlier this week he's suing Grubhub, alleging the company harmed consumers during the pandemic by charging hidden fees and by misleading consumers about them using dark patterns when it comes to how they charge their fees, where it would be bracketed under taxes and surcharges. The food delivery service grew rapidly over the pandemic as in-person dining was shifted because of lockdowns to takeout and delivery orders. A response from Grubhub is that the spokesperson has said, "We're disappointed that they have moved forward with this lawsuit because our practices have always complied with DC law. Many of the practices at issue have been discontinued, and we will aggressively defend our business in court and look forward to continuing to serve DC restaurants and diners." The charges also came as that their charges were not transparent about fees and charges users, saying that company does not display additional service fees in ways that it should, as people were seeing the fees on their credit card statements or their bank account statements that was not necessarily disclosed in the app. Grubhub has allegedly took the number of misleading steps in various times to drive traffic to its platforms. It's part of the accusation. The complaint alleges including by listing restaurants on its site without consent, creating non-official phone numbers for restaurants in a bid to generate more Grubhub orders, and creating non-official websites for restaurants that routed visitors to Grubhub for that competition. And Elon Musk is back in the news. Starlink now wants to disrupt in-flight Wi-Fi. So if you've taken a flight in the past little while, you'll always see that there is an option for in-flight Wi-Fi. If you pay a fee, you're able to use the Wi-Fi for your journey. And Elon Musk's most recent thing that he's talked about is going to Mars, but now he's saying that SpaceX, his rocket company, is working to solve an all too familiar problem, but here when it comes to in-flight service. Starlink, the company's satellite internet division, is working on a solution to disrupt the Wi-Fi industry, which is led by two players called Viasat, used by Delta, JetBlue, and Virgin Atlantic in the United States, and GoGo, owned by Intersat, which is used by United Airlines, American Airlines, and Alaskan Airlines. And some of these airlines use both vendors when they need to, but this market is supposed to be a big one with a massive growth potential, and it's been recent valued at a sector that's going to be worth $3 billion and that was in 2020, and it's supposed to increase to $6.7 billion by 2027. And one of the reasons the companies made the investment is that in-flight Wi-Fi services are sometimes very slow, and Starlink can compete because they have their satellites in place that are closer to Earth and are able to make sure that Wi-Fi users get the advantage they need in their in-flight service. And this is coming after Elon Musk in the news when he has sent Starlink satellites to Ukraine to make sure that people there are not cut off from the internet as their infrastructure is constantly bombarded by and bombed by the Russian forces. And it's unfortunate to announce today that Madeleine Albright, she has passed away today at the age of 85. She was the first female U.S. Secretary of State, and she died of cancer. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family. President Bill Clinton chose Albright as America's top diplomat in 1996, and she served in the capacity for the last 4 years of the Clinton administration. And at the time, she was the highest ranking woman in the history of the United States government, although she was not in line for succession for presidency because she was a native of Czechoslovakia. But we remember her and her great work, and our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family for all her service. That's all the time we have today. I am Ramona Singh. This is the Daily Brief, and stay well and take care until tomorrow. God bless.
You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y, a South Asian Canadian channel.
And you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan, and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का नंबर 1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9
Television. You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.